Ladies and gentlemen, we are back on Tousi TV. The Westminster bubble is falling apart. The House of Parliament are completely undermining our constitution. MPs, the Speaker of the Commons, everybody is completely chaotic. So we have Stephen Barrett, the barrister, a friend of the channel, to make some sense, see what's actually going on. First things first, hello, Stephen. How are you?
Hello. It's an honor to be back. Always an honor to be on.
Yeah. So before we actually get your opinion, I'm just gonna, in case you guys missed it, obviously there's been chaos. Let's just go to this piece of the article that's been going around, obviously, about what happened. Hours away from the biggest rebellion over his leadership, Starmer decided to intervene personally and visited Hoyle, the Speaker of the Commons, in his office behind the Commons chamber. Those briefed on the meeting said that the Labour leader warned Hoyle that Labour MPs' security was at risk. Only Labour MPs, apparently. Many had been deluged of criticisms, threats and abuse, obviously since abstaining on the previous votes in November because of protests after the tense meeting with Labour MPs desperately stalling inside the chamber. Hoyle eventually agreed. And now you know the rest. So, Stephen, what is happening? So then we had the Tories obviously walking out, boycotting the vote. The SNP also had a meltdown, and everyone's now mostly targeting the Labour side and, well, the opposition party rather than just Lindsay Hall. Can you explain this madness? What's actually happening?
Well, it is madness, and I should probably use phrases like constitutionally unprecedented rather than madness. But it is certainly, a lot has been happening that is very constitutionally unprecedented. What came out last night is there is a clerk to the House of Commons, and he gives legal advice to the Speaker, and probably gives legal advice to anybody who's nice to him and asks his view, because he will be the font of all sorts of parliamentary rules. Parliament is supposed to be a rules-based system that makes it law-like. Anything that is a rules-based system is law-like, and that's why I feel able to talk about these things. Now, it is what's supposed to happen was the SNP was supposed to get an amendment to the government's motion, and then the government was supposed to respond. So it was supposed to be an SNP government show. Part of your viewers might know parliamentary time is sort of divvied up. Everybody's to get their fair share of it. And it was, yesterday was supposed to be SNP day or SNP night. And Starmer barged into all of this and tried to make it all about Labour.
Yeah.
This extraordinary meeting, it is constitutionally extraordinary for the leader of a party to go and talk to the Speaker of the House of Commons and apply pressure. That does not happen. The whips normally talk to the Speaker of the House of Commons. Speaker of the House of Commons must be impartial. They're supposed to be, like Caesar's wife, they are supposed to be utterly above reproach. They are not allowed to do things they all had a political party, but they're supposed to have left all of that behind. Like a judge, they are supposed to be utterly impartial. And that's what's come under massive strain by Keir Starmer putting all of this pressure on the Speaker and the Speaker caving. He's done something completely constitutionally unprecedented. This is not normal. And that man I mentioned, the clerk to the House of Commons who gives legal advice, he then did something that's also not often done. There's a mechanism for him to write a letter and formally record that I told you not to do this, and you are nonetheless doing it. And that's as a lawyer, I don't do it in a public way, but I might advise a client in private. I would always want it in writing, because I can get sued if I get things wrong. So I'd always want it in writing. And it would be the I told you not to do this, but you did it anyway advice. And that sort of, it absolves you of criticism, and it's a wise thing to do. And the clerk the clerk of the House of Commons, he's not implicated in any way. He is definitely a goodie in this scenario. He did absolutely everything properly, and then he wrote a letter saying, "Look, I told you not to do this. I want this officially recorded that I told you not to do this." The Speaker then did it anyway, and the House of Commons exploded. I mean, it just blew up, and the House of Commons had a collective. What do they call it? Constitutionally unprecedented event. Or it just went completely
Meltdown, yeah.
Absolutely everything fell apart. Largely the entire evening just became a complete farce from the moment that the Speaker did this, and the House of Commons exploded. coming out of it, there are very serious questions because the Labour leader faced a serious rebellion, and that was reported in the Guardian. There's absolutely no reason to disbelieve the Guardian on this. And we all know that there's quite a lot of pressure in the Labour Party on this issue, and therefore the immediate question is: did the Speaker do this in order to avoid that rebellion and benefit his old party leader and his old party? And of course, they will, of course, all deny that. Then what was, again, absolutely unprecedented was a BBC, again, absolutely no reason to disbelieve him, Newsnight journalist tweeted that senior Labour sources had told him that the Speaker did this because we threatened him. Right. That is a constitutionally unprecedented event. We're really ratcheting them up for one evening. Absolutely bizarre that any party leader would threaten. And so your viewers know what they say they threatened him with is that after the election, if there's a Labour majority, obviously he needs to be reconfirmed as Speaker again if he wants to be Speaker again, and he probably will want to be Speaker again. It's a nice job, people who want it. And they said literally, we won't vote for you. So we'll have a majority of MPs, so you'll never be Speaker again. Ha 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 ha. I always, a child of 80s cartoons, I always imagine that when people blackmail people, they give a slightly evil laugh. But they probably don't. But it was absolutely bizarre that happened.
Yep.
Absolutely bizarre that they then told a journalist. So not only are they blackmailing the Speaker, but they're proud of it. The Speaker then came out and said, oh, no, that didn't happen, because the Speaker's got some common sense. But that then causes it's the cover up that kills Maya, and it's just that doesn't make it better, does it? No. It's like, well, now one of you's lying. And now I don't know whether the senior Labour sources are telling the truth or whether the Speaker is telling the truth. Oh, you've just made it worse. And what then went on, and the tweet I sent, and the point that I think is really important here, is that they've fallen back and said, we did this because our MPs are receiving threats of violence. And if one of our political parties is doing things because they're receiving threats of violence, then our political parties are no longer free. We're no longer a democracy, and a violent mob, the people who are making violent threats, are in charge. If you want to, I said it was mob rule because it is mob rule. Look, I'm so careful in my wording. Do you see how I don't actually say anything political there?
That's true.
I'm describing it. This is
describing
it is mob rule because it is, and you can't land a blow. It's a bit like when I called the kangaroo court a kangaroo court. It's like, well, it's for these reasons.
It's not a real court. Legally, it's not a real court. Yeah.
So and that's what this is, and I think that is the ultimate takeaway. I think this is. There'll be there's a lot of focus now on the Speaker. Clearly, his reputation for impartiality lies in tatters on the floor. Have I crashed?
No, you're here. You're still here. I can hear you.
Can you still hear me? Sorry, we can edit that out, can't we?
No, yes, the speakers
are really dragging, and I don't know why.
It's fine. It's your internet. But
my internet's really good. Rude. Anyway, sorry. The point to get across is that mob rule is the collapse of democracy. Our MPs, whether you vote Conservative or you vote Labour or you vote Lib Dem or Green, you do so on the basis that they will then represent that strain of politics. And if instead what they're representing is what people bully them into and threaten them to do. If I were to do this to you, Maya, if I were to say to make threats of violence against you unless you do what I want, you're not free. You're not doing you're under my control. I'm in charge. And this is a very scary thing. It's very, very scary. People cannot use threats of violence to control our democratically elected.
And I think if I say one thing, because you all mentioned the rule based, and in terms of the reaction so far and the defense coming from Starmer, for example, and actually Lindsay Hoyle last night when one of the Tory MPs shouted, saying all the accusation being shouted at, he was kind of ignoring or being kind of nervous. But when someone shouted in terms of allegation, direct allegation, for example, Sue Gray, we heard Sue Gray came to you. He was very quick to say, no, I've not bumped into Sue Gray. And it's Keir Starmer also because he's a lawyer. and he knows in terms of legal obligation in terms of how to use language. When he responded today, said, "I have categorically not personally like pressured the Speaker of the Council." Like, you didn't really deny anybody else from your team doing it. So it's another problem because a lot of people, for
Oh,
example, those who are already supporters of Labour would say, "Well, yes, he's telling the truth." No, that they implies that nobody from the Labour Party or the opposition pressured the Speaker because Keir Starmer said, "I categorically did not." But those who actually understand the language, the legal language, were like, "Well, he only denied himself. He didn't really say anybody else." Yeah, what do you think?
no, I think that's a very good point. And once again, the cover up kills, and we're pushed always into looking at the technical language that's used. And I think both of them come out of it extremely badly. And we really have to look at this fundamental question of: do we want to live in a country where our members of parliament can be physically intimidated with threats of violence? And MPs have been killed. MPs have been murdered,
Yeah,
and an MP has been forced to
resign.
resign, to step back. A very talented and able man will no longer
Mm,
be in the House of Commons, and that is a tragedy, whichever
mm,
party
yeah.
you support, or indeed if you support none. I mean, it and we've lost MPs. This is it's getting very serious.
Mm,
And the other thing I would flag up to your viewers, because they've not yet been named, largely because they are the big do nothings. But what are the Metropolitan Police doing about all of this? So we're at the stage now where the Speaker of the House of Commons is breaking with our traditions,
yeah,
changing our democracy, doing things which are inherently constitutionally, novel, or however it was I termed
yeah.
them, just outrageous things. In order we're told to protect MPs, which I want MPs to be safe, although they
Mm,
they do have to do their job, even if they are
yeah,
scared.
exactly.
But the Metropolitan Police are effectively silent. Where are they? And they allowed a protest
Mm.
outside
Well,
Parliament
one of the
last night.
moments that when for those who watched
And
it last night, we were getting egged, and the police are standing next to us. They saw the person. They, for half a second, decided to chase. Half a second, then they stopped. They just gave up on going after the person. I was like, what? I don't know what's going on anymore.
you were egged.
Well, I was almost egged. It went over me to Martin Daubney from GB News. He got egged. We were all getting basically shouted at and attacked, and the police were right next to us because to control the situation. But when the person also covering their faces because it's illegal, they still didn't really stop them anyway. When they egged Martin Daubney, they started running away. And by the way, inside the crowd, so slow running away. The police turned around to chase them. Then they gave up, literally after half a second. Then they just turned around back to me and Martin Daubney. It's like, I don't know what they're doing. So it's one of the situations where the next day, today, they'll come out, they tweet saying, "Can you identify this person?" Like, well, you could have stopped them in a moment.
Yeah, this is what keeps happening. They're not actually doing any policing, and it's
Mm,
the problem is that situation then gets worse. Okay,
mm,
that you don't solve a water leak by ignoring it. You don't. This is just not how you fix
yep.
these issues. It's absolutely shocking behaviour, and the Metropolitan Police. I mean, I wrote an article explaining all their powers when their commissioner was going on the television pretending he didn't have any. It's just unbelievable, and they need if we don't have, and this is what rule of law collapse
Mm,
is that. So I'm very clear for your viewers. The rule of law and mob rule are opposite sides. Okay, they are diametrically opposed. If you have the rule of law, you'll have the rule of clear. You have the rule of clear laws known in advance. Everybody knows what they are. They're enforced free and fairly. So they apply to everybody equally, and that is a fair rules based
yeah.
system. And the opposite of that is mob rule, which is emotional, and the person who is in charge is the person who screams the most or is violently threatening the most, and that they are opposites. You cannot have both. You have
Mm.
one or the other, and it does look increasingly as though we are slipping into mob rule, which is why, and I can say that without it being politics,
No, no.
because it's just the definition. It's just what's going on.
That's true.
What is actively happening is that the people who scream and make violent threats are the people who are getting what they want.
Yeah.
And if that's true, then they are rulers, they are in charge. And we have left the law and the rule of law behind. And the Metropolitan Police are absolutely complicit in that.
Yes, yes. It is fascinating. The history of governance or structured society in the what we now call the Western kind of developed Christian world. Like for example, England, the structure of England, and then the UK. Before, if you hadn't done anything about society, it would have gone towards mob rule. Any like group, whether it's the farming group or whatever group back in the day, like 200 years ago, they would have basically anyone who's louder would win. But of course, because we devolved from technically absolute monarchy before and then back again towards constitutional monarchy, we chose rule-based society. And many countries like us, the other societies, there's another option. For example, Russia, they went the oligarchs, and basically the mob rule was happening with that, and everybody was basically just doing their own things. So they decided to go, for example, someone like Putin is a father figure, is the figurehead, a centralized figurehead, in order to stop the mob rule. They went that way, that in terms of governance and structure. We went rule-based, they went with a strong figure. But now it seems like nobody chooses to go towards mob rule. But it seems like our societies, it's not like no one's actually choosing to do it in terms of a policy, a constitutional change. But it seems like because of a lack of people respecting the rule-based society, whether it's the parliamentarians or the lawyers and everybody else, the judges and the police, we are indirectly or intentionally going towards mob rule, which nobody wanted to. Even the Russians, the Iranians, the Chinese never want mob rule, let alone democratic people. It's a messed up situation.
It is, and people aren't defending democracy. People aren't standing up for democracy. To have a healthy democracy, we need more people to be engaged. We need a system which engages everybody. We need a system in which everybody is respected. I mean, one of the things that I do, Maya, is that I have friends across the political spectrum. I'm more than happy to make it very, very plain that I have really close friends who I utterly adore, who are completely wrong on politics.
Is that me?
But because we need that in a healthy society. You've got to have this, and you've got to respect democracy. You've got to understand that sometimes you will lose a vote. And that's not the end of the world. Do you know what? There's still sun will still come out tomorrow, and that's what you do. That we need this thing called losers' consent. And here, after the referendum, we saw no operation of losers' consent. And in the United States, we have seen an utter lack of losers' consent. And if you don't have losers' consent, you can't have democracy.
Yeah.
And we really need to start asking where we are going, because we won't stay in mob rule for long. I mean, we are going to pick one of the solutions. Either we go back to a liberal, civilized democracy, or we will we will slide, and the whole of the West will slide into dictatorship.
To be fair, to do that,
which one do we actually want?
Yeah, to do devil's advocate in terms of the lack of losers' consent, it goes back to the roots of the problem. And one of the reasons the losers' consent exists, doesn't exist, whether it's the Remain voters after the referendum, whether it was actually Hillary Clinton's side just before the 2016 election, they were preparing, and the 2020 election, it was actually the Democrats already preparing. They were saying it publicly before the election that basically, if we lose, we're gonna not accept it. And then obviously some people, the Trump side, that did happen, same side, same thing. The reason I say the lack of loser consent is also because it goes back to the lack of kind of respect and credibility when it comes to the institutions. So people don't really trust even the electoral system. People don't really think, rightly or wrongly, that if this election is happening, is the result going to be legitimate or not? And so that goes to a bigger problem, which has been going on for a while, and the political establishment and everybody else ignored it. The credibility of the system. Are we impartial? Can we trust Ofcom? Can we trust the Electoral Commission? And that's why the kind of the devil's advocate on behalf of whoever it is, left wing or right wing or Remain or Brexit, not doing losers' consent. It's because, again, people in the establishment created this environment so people could actually not give consent as losers, right?
Well, I need to introduce your viewers to a concept, a constitutional law concept, which is called entrenchment. Entrenchment is the idea that you can get a political philosophy and you can embed it in the society so that if you lose the election, you don't lose the election because your ideas are entrenched.
That's the Labour Party, isn't it? Labour policy is in place.
Well, Our constitution is very, very clever in that it knows that entrenchment is absolutely toxic. Entrenchment will destroy a democracy.
Okay.
You know, again, it's the entrenchment is active lack of loser consent,
Right.
and attempting to have your politics embedded throughout the systems that exist and the institutions that exist.
Feels like it's happening now with the civil service.
is anti-democratic. Well, it may have happened already.
Ah.
But what I will say on that is that our constitution is remarkably good at getting rid of it, but it requires political will.
That's the thing.
And that's why quite often I have been called on in British public life to go and talk to MPs or to explain in the press.
Yep.
Yes, the MPs can do this if they want to. And always I've said, I'm not going to say they should do it. It's entirely up to them what they do. That's political. But constitutionally, yes, they can. I've become the yes they can kid, because we have a constitution that protects against this. If there is entrenchment that's been going on, if you want to protect democracy, you will have to dig it all out. And if you don't trust institutions, and it's key that you mentioned that word, because I think it might well become the word that defines me in public for a long time now. But if you don't restore impartiality,
yep.
You know, if you can't, remember I told you off once because you said something and I said it was political.
You were like a freedom fighter or something.
Obsessed.
Yeah, freedom loving or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I've been obsessed for 4 or 5 years about what it is to be political or not be political, because that's part of impartiality. If you don't understand what it is to say something political, then the chances are you're going to say something political.
That's interesting.
How are you going to hold your back? If you don't know where the line is, how are you not going to accidentally cross it? And that's what keeps happening in our society. People like Gary Lineker, I just don't think he understands where the line is. You know, and we had a very junior judge recently who just didn't understand where the line is. And increasingly, you know, all the BBC's problems are because they don't understand where the line is. Somebody's going to have to firstly define what it is to do or say something that is political in a way that hopefully everybody can understand. Now, your viewers, don't worry, I have done it. So I've got a definition. But then secondly, we're going to need that baked into impartiality. We're going to need to identify all the institutions that are key to us, all the institutions we actually want to keep. I mean, we don't have to keep any of them. Again, it's a political decision. Do you want a BBC? Do you not want a BBC? I have no view. You know, it's entirely up to people. But those we want to keep, we will make impartial.
Right.
And then we will, stage 3, we must enforce that impartiality. And it will be much, much stronger if it is seen that Labour people enforce impartiality against Labour people, and Conservative people enforce impartiality against Conservative people, so that everybody knows we have turned our back on cheap tribalism. We value institutions, we value impartiality, we understand it, and we're going to fight for it. And if you want to preserve democracy, that's what you're going to have to do.
Yes, and absolutely. And actually, on that note, when it comes to explaining certain things and digging deep in terms of the legality and impartiality stuff, I can actually say, guys, without confirming or denying anything, you guys know Tousi TV is expanding. Tousi TV Plus is coming soon. As I say, without confirming or denying that, there could potentially be a show around law. And if we had someone that could actually do that for us, it would be great. But you guys have to tune in soon to find out when we make the announcement, right, Stephen?
Well, that sounds very fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for joining. And of course, guys, don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. I'm Maya Tousi, and we are the media.